Hello, this is Power in the Word, and I'm Scott Reed. Thanks for joining me for this particular presentation in our Temples in the Text playlist as we look today at the Abrahamic covenant and its implications into temple worship. Many times as we consider the Abrahamic covenant, we might turn to Genesis chapter 17, or as it is found in modern-day Revelation, in Abraham chapter 2. However, its beginnings actually come before that, as you can see in this picture, and if you take a close look, we're going to follow those events found in Genesis 15, 9 through 18. As we come into our scripture text, starting in verse 9, Abraham is told to take a heifer of 3 years old, a goat of 3 years old, a ram of 3 years old, and a turtle dove and a young pigeon. And he is to divide them in the midst. And as our picture showed, laid each piece one against another, but the birds divide not. So you can see in our picture, we have cut the heifer in half, both pieces to opposite sides, as well as the goat, the ram, the dove, and the pigeon. However, leaving the dove and the pigeon whole. And taking then a close look of the picture, you can see that there are 8 pieces, the very number that symbolizes that of covenants. And he has established down the center a path of blood, or we might call it a covenant path. Coming back into our text, we see in verse 11 that when the fowls came down upon the carcasses, Abraham drove them away, demonstrating his great diligence in keeping these covenants, having to do with the law of sacrifice. Verse 12, when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and lo, a word meaning take a close look, a horror of great darkness fell upon him. The scripture indicating that this is the dark part of the story, or that the very opposition himself was present. Verse 13, and he said unto Abram, and after that experience, verse 17 and 18, it came to pass when the sun went down, and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp, good imagery to underline, passed between those pieces. The smoking furnace and the burning lamp, as found in Exodus 19, with Moses on the Mount Sinai, are symbols for the presence of God, that he manifested himself and has accepted Abram's sacrifice as he has given it. Verse 18, and we read, in the same day the Lord made a, darken the word, covenant with Abram. Having read Genesis 15, we understand that Abram, as he is still referred to, has provided proof of his diligence in keeping the law of obedience and sacrifice, and therefore is deserving of further light and knowledge given in the fullness of the laws and ordinances of the Abrahamic covenant, known as the law of the gospel, as well as the law of celestial marriage and a righteous posterity. President Nelson, honoring this great man's consecration to the God of heaven, has stated, to us the honored name of Abram is important. It is mentioned in more verses of Scripture of the restoration than even all verses of the Bible, as mentioned here on the bottom of this slide. Let's then go into now the Lord giving that further light and knowledge in Genesis chapter 17. Starting here in our text then, verse 4 states, as for me, behold, my covenant. Be sure you underline. Take in a moment here to stop and underline each time, all the way down each time in verses 4 through 15 that mention the word covenant. And thou shalt be a father of many nations. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. For a father of many nations have I made thee. And as indicated here in my note, Abram is the Hebrew for exalted father. Well, how do you get better than that? Well, you receive the new name from God, meaning father of a multitude. So one, it's great to be a God exalted father, but how about a God that has numerous posterity, a father of a multitude? Verse 6, and I will make thee exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee, including, might we note, the King of Kings. And I will establish my underline covenant between me and thee and thy seed after thee in their generation for an everlasting underline covenant to be a God unto thee and to thy seed after thee. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. And I will be their God. And God said unto Abraham, thou shalt keep my underline covenant. Therefore, thou and thy seed after thee in their generations. This is my covenant, underline, which you shall keep between me and you and thy seed. After thee, every man-child among you shall be circumcised, and ye shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a darken this word, as all covenants have a token. This token of the covenant, underline, will be between me and you. And he that is darken 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, every man-child in your generation, he that is born in the house or brought with money of any stranger which is not of thy seed. Thus symbolizing 8, the symbolic number of covenants, that we are cut into the Abrahamic covenant at 8 years old. A JST edition and found in your footnote in 17:7a. Coming down to verse 13 through 15, we conclude, he that is born in thy house and he that is bought with thy money must needs be circumcised, and my underline covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting underline covenant. And the uncircumcised man-child, whose flesh of his foreskin is not circumcised, that soul shall be cut off. Good wording in making covenants. We're cut in and we are cut off from his people. He hath broken my covenant, underline. And God said unto Abraham, as for Sarai, thy wife, she will be part of this covenant as well. Thou shalt not call her name Sarai anymore, but she shall receive a new name as well, that of Sarah. And again, as written in my note, Sarai is the Hebrew to act as a princess, but Sarah is princess. So how do you get better than Sarai, who meaning to act as a princess? Well, you get her to be a princess. The very word denoting royalty. Coming back into our slides, we then understand the Abrahamic covenant as outlined in Genesis 17. Only to add, as mentioned in the beginning, Abraham 2, 6 through 11, which denotes 5 responsibilities or covenantal bindings associated with the Abrahamic covenant. 1. You become a preserver of records, specifically the records of Scripture. Second, you gain an everlasting possession or a promised land. You know it as the celestial kingdom. Third, you gain access to the authority of the priesthood of God and the responsibility of blessing and serving others. Fourth, you receive the promise of salvation and all the blessings associated with the gospel. And fifth, you are promised eternal posterity throughout all time and eternity. Noting that these covenantal bindings all are associated with the temple of God. And then here in the middle is this quote by Russell M. Nelson, who said, "The new and everlasting covenant and the Abrahamic covenant are essentially the same. Two ways of phrasing the same covenant God made with mortal men and women at different times." In footnote 2 of this article, President Nelson explains, "The new and everlasting covenant is the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It includes all ordinances and covenants necessary for our salvation. It is new whenever the Lord renews or restores it, and it is everlasting because it does not change." And thus, to summarize, the new and everlasting covenant, or the Abrahamic covenant, which operate under the holy priesthood after the order of the Son of God, or the Melchizedek priesthood, 4 keys and their associated ordinance. First is the key of gathering, which holds the ordinance of baptism and is associated with the great prophet Moses. Next is the key of the dispensation of the gospel of Abraham, or you know it as the ordinances of the endowment, celestial marriage, and of righteous posterity, associated with that of Elias or Noah. Next, we have the keys of binding or sealing, ensuring that all that is done here on this earth has efficacy for us in the heavens, and is associated with the prophet Elijah. Last of all is the key of scriptural stewardship, or that of records. And that concludes my presentation on the Abrahamic covenant, or the new and everlasting covenant, and its connection to the ordinances of the temple and the covenants made there. I hope that as a member of the Abrahamic covenant that you have learned a few details and consider yourself a blessed candidate for the ordinances of the temple. And I hope you'll join me again as we look at further details in understanding temple worship.